putting this bill through to its third reading.
I call Mark Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd just like to support the comments that were made by my colleague Chris Farfoy earlier, who's also a member of the Law and Order Select Committee with me, in congratulating the Chair of the Committee, Jackie Dean, and also both Minister Honourable Judith Collins and Honourable Anne Tolley in bringing this bill to the House, because it is a very important bill, and it's important because it is focused on the safety of the general public. This amendment is in line, Mr Speaker, with National's programme of building a safer New Zealand, with a focus on staying tough on criminals and protecting the rights of victims. And I'd like to come back to Mr Richard Prosser, and he made some very good points, and he went into a lot of detail about firearms. But there's only a very small percentage of New Zealanders that would ever be involved in that sort of detail, that would ever understand that sort of detail. Many of these imitation firearms and air rifles and air pistols that we have in circulation now in New Zealand, most people, most members of the general public would never be able to tell the difference between a legitimate firearm and one that is an air rifle or an imitation. They're very, very difficult to tell the difference between. In terms of how dangerous they are, let us not forget, Mr Speaker, that it was very, very sad to see the loss of Don Wilkinson. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, Sergeant Don Wilkinson, who was in the performance of his duties, was chased down by, I think, 2 offenders, and he was shot with a air rifle and killed. And the reality of it is now with these high-powered air rifles is that they are able to deliver a fatal shot. They're able to kill people now. So, and that brings me to the tightening of the import controls, and I just think that it's so important that we've taken this positive step in terms of actually now allowing the police and giving the police a lot more control and oversight into actually who's responsible enough to import these types of weapons into the country. Mr Speaker, when an armed and dangerous offender walks into a bank carrying a military-style replica or PSP-type air rifle and shoves it in the face of a bank employee, the psychological stress and harm is no less diminished had it been a high-powered rifle. They don't know the difference. They can't tell the difference. And there's no upside. I mean, Mr Clendon made a very good point, is that even in relation to the offender, if an offender picks up a firearm, even if it's a replica, and walks into a bank, then he's probably asking for what he gets. However, he is putting the police in a situation when they confront him, they have no choice but to treat that firearm as a proper high-powered weapon, even if it is a replica or an air rifle. So it's with great pleasure, Mr Speaker, that I'm able to stand in support of this bill. I support the classification regime that will be very similar to that administered between 1992 and 2008 and was generally understood and accepted by the firearms community, but this bill will add a lot more clarity around that legislation. So it's with great pleasure, Mr Speaker, that I do stand in support of this bill. Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
Call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you, Mr.